Eva, floor is yours. Here.
Am I clear?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to start my speech. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Yes, under the status quo right now, the moment there is no altruism, for example, or only a little people who are only have altruism in doing the good deeds. What happened under the status quo right now is that how people helping others people or people doing a good deeds is also is having other choices they did not have. For example, like how they are helping other people for the sake of their own benefit. For example, what we want under our side of the house is that how helping others people or doing a good deed should be in altruism motive, and how it should not be for hoping for the feedback that they are going to get after you are helping people. Our stand is clear that we want to propose the proposal where the preferred word where altruism is the only acceptable motive in doing a good in order to give more valuable value for the good deeds that these people have. But first argument, right? Why altruism is the only acceptable motive in doing a good deed? Because under the status quo, right now, the moment people are helping other people, for example, like how politicians are helping these people who are in the poverty, or how influential people are helping these people who are in the poverty. What their motives are is that how they want to climb for the social ladder under the status quo. They want to be seen as a hero that actually helping other people. They're hoping for the fact. They're hoping for the feedback by those good deeds that they're done. Why it is so harmful under the status quo? The moment you do good deeds and you show it for the world, you do the good deeds for the sake of you, not the sake of other people who you are help under the status quo. Like how in the governmental level, ladies and gentlemen, the moment this politician helping others under the status quo right now, that is highly likely that this politician only have helping people who are in poverty in order for them to campaign for the election, for example. What is told you? It told you that the form of helping others is only in the form of political gesture, ladies and gentlemen, or even worse, it's only done in a campaign, ladies and gentlemen. This is why it is so harmful to begin with, right? Because of how this politician is not helping people. The value of this politician helping people is not actually for affiliate this underprivileged people life condition, but in order for them to win the campaign, ladies and gentlemen. But second layer, right? Towards the influential people level. Under the status quo right now, there is a lot of influential people are doing a good things for helping people in engagement within the movement. People too on how we take the threat of that under our side of the house, the engagement towards movement or how a movement like Black Lives Matter and so on and so forth will be lessened. But we think that it's still completely fine, ladies and gentlemen, because of how people will equip themselves to understand and know the whole issue, ladies and gentlemen, because they are actually doing good deeds where they are so self-love and not happen for a feedback, ladies and gentlemen. They are not only following the trend like what happened under the opposition side of the house, right? Even if it is only a little number, we think that it's going to be valuable, ladies and gentlemen, because of how under the status quo. Because of how under the status quo, good these people, for example, like how helping people in poverty or spreading awareness towards certain campaign under the side of the house, under opposition side of the house, they're going to do this good and posting in social media and so on and so forth without even understanding the main issue that this movement have in the very first place, right? This is what we don't want under our side of the house. Under our side of the house, the moment we want to spread awareness, for example, or campaigning in a movement, under our side of the house, you should understand the issue first, for example, or or how you are doing that for not having a good deeds, ladies and gentlemen. Under our side of the house, the moment these people do movement campaign, for example, spread awareness, what they're going to have is actually a genuine intention, not for having a good name in society and so on and so forth. But third of all, right, even at individual level, under our side of the house, the moment the moment this individual doing helping others or doing a good deeds, they are fully aware of this and with the needs that people, with the needs of people that they are going to help this environment. That's to say, the help will not mismix this environment because they're really because they are genuinely care for these people's needs. For example, like how under our side of the house, under our side of the house, the moment you as CEO, for example, helping poverty, what you are going to do is giving them a proper food stuff, for example, or giving them education. Not like how Bill Gates, for example, giving computers for African that are not actually needed for them. Right? Just to say, under the side of the house, there is making us a mismatch or the donation that we are going to do. Right? So look, under our proposal, the moment we are helping people by helping people with altruism intention, is that how they are not hoping for feedback, ladies and gentlemen. The moment these people, for example, want to help, at the moment that they are willing to understand the needs of these people that they are going to help, or how the moment for you want to help the poverty in Africa, for example, you are going to give them aid, for example, like how you are going to give them proper food stock, for example, or giving them a proper education, sending them a teacher, and so on and so forth, right? And this is what going to happen under our side of the house. Yes, we concede, even if the engagement will be less, we think we completely fine. At the very least, the discourse that happened under our side under our side of the house is going to be good, ladies and gentlemen, and not toxic, because of how the discourse under our side of the house is whether is about how you actually understand the needs of people or the core issue that are going to be solved in the status quo, not only the discourse only for the trend. I'm already proving two things in my speech. First, on how altruism should be the only acceptable motive the moment you help other people because of how it shows how you really have a good intention without hoping for any feedback or hoping any benefit that will be paid to you. And second, even if there's only a little hack or little discourse, it will be completely fine on our side of the house. Look, opposition side of the house need to provide, and the moment the moment these people want to help, it's okay for them to use poverty, for example, for social ladder, for them to have for them to have a feedback, like having a good name and a good name in society, good reputation, and how then those kind of things are humanly acceptable under the side of the house. But we proudly propose this motion.
Thank you, Prime Minister. To respond to the case of the Prime Minister, I call upon the Leader of Opposition. Floor is yours. Here.
I would prefer kalau misalkan ada POI langsung pakai mic aja since I'm not opening my Zoom. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, with doing that. Jadi feel free to do so. Alright, speech will start in dimatiin dulu. Speech will start in 3, 2, 1. The only case coming from side opening government is that people would understand, hence the contribution will be beneficial. I'm going to dismiss all of that. But before that, what do we stand for as opening opposition? Opening opposition is the team that focuses on utilitarian benefit. This means that we don't care whatever reason that you're going to use in order to do good deeds, so long as you do it, you're going to be appreciated, you're going to be considered as a good guy. We're going to be the team that not only consider the utilitarian benefit for you as an individual that do good deeds, but also those individuals who has been impacted by it. Because a lot of individual survival requires and hinges on this particular utilitarian benefit. Then the burden on side government is to prove to you why does all of this survival, means of survival and means of achieving meaning in life, it's not justified at the end of the day. All forms of good deed is accepted, whether it is to make connection with other individual because you have a sexual interest in them, or to feel good about yourself, or to elevate yourself in terms of political capital, we're going to be okay with that. A couple of rebuttal to side opening government. I'm going to be very quick here because the only argument is that people would understand. I don't think so. I don't think understanding is parallel with reasoning. For example, me doing my job right now is done out of self-preservation and not on love. But I still have to master actual interest to understand it in the very beginning. Under side opening government, you would have no self-benefit in the very first place, right? You would only do it simply because you care about other individual and such. But under side proposition, because you actually care and want to look good to other individual, or politician want to look good to other individual, they will actually learn about the movement. They will actually hear out what is it that the movement wants. And this is why a lot of politicians, for example, like Hillary, do a lot of hearing session with a bunch of minorities from other state, and that is done because she doesn't really, not because she actually cares about minorities, but most likely because she wants to win the election and such, and she wants to look good with it, right? But what is the cost under side government, right? What is the cost of understanding that is not exclusive at the end of the day? This means that all political capital is done by individual who actually cares about it, and most likely the individual who cares about it are an individual with the same race as minority, for example, or the individual who is the same, or who is disprivileged and who is poor. What is the problem with this? The problem with this is that this type of individual doesn't have the power to create changes in the very first place. So under their side, the responsibility to create changes hinges only on minorities and poor who doesn't have the political capital to do so, because they require a lot of minority who empathize with the problem, right? You do not need to feel that problem to create solvency. We say solvency can still exist regardless of the reasoning, and this is done by, sadly, the majority who actually has the power to do so, knowing the fact that the world hasn't progressed to the particular path in which power are distributed equally. That is also the burden that they need to prove, right? Firstly, let's talk about the means of accessing happiness. Why under their side goodness is only attainable by the elites? Two reasons. Firstly, let's talk about who can afford selflessness. Who can afford selflessness is most likely going to be the elites. Three reasons why. If you do good deeds and accept it back to build connection, to feel good around yourself, you're most likely are going to be poor, right? Because this is the only means of happiness that you're going to have. You don't have a lot of capital. You don't have, for example, the capacity to buy Ferrari, but at least you can do good deeds to your partner so that you can have sexual attraction and you can feel their love and etc. Or you can feel good about yourself when you give money towards the beggar, towards poor people, or who beg for money on the streets and such, right? Secondly, the elites doesn't care about reasoning, right? They can afford to lose capital without losing anything, because thirdly, human work on the basis of net loss and net benefit mindset, right? And the net loss that the elites ask when they do good deeds is reduced and is non-existent. But when people who is not rich, and when people in the middle class society or with this do good deeds, they consider the net benefit and the net loss. Hence, most likely under their side, those who can afford to do good deeds are only going to be the elites, because the net loss that they're going to have when they do good deeds is not considered anymore as such, right? Why is it important for the poor or disadvantaged to attain good deeds? Three reasons. Firstly, it is because the only means of happiness that they have is only through doing good deeds. You cannot get capital, but you can feel good about yourself when you do nice things and connection with other individual. Secondly, human is an inherently self-comparative being, but the comparative is not always linear, right? Comparing capital with good deeds is something that the poor do. Sure, that guy might have a Ferrari, but at least I support my community and I give money towards the poor and such, and I can feel good about myself, right? Thirdly, we value individual in a capitalist structure by their contribution, right? What do we mean by this? Take an example of how we value lower middle class individual or minority when we explain that they are an excellent member of society, they go to charity and they help other individual and such. But understand, they do it oftentimes out of their own self-preservation and out of their own self-defense. As a minority and poor, you have to act 100% better than the rich in order to live the same life, or in order to live a normal life. Because you don't have protection against the law, for example. You don't have any form of valuation such as capital that needs the community wants to, and that needs other individual wants to connect with you, that needs the community value you as an individual as such, right? So under their side, the good deeds is going to be accessible by the rich, and what's worse is that minority and poor people will not be able to access it. What's worse is that if we value individual by their own contribution and we dismiss those poor individual or minority contribution by saying that those contributions only they for themselves, we dismiss all of the political capital, for example, to fight for their oppression, for example, to value them as an important part of the society in which they have to be fought for, and etc. Because they're no longer in order, not government need to prove, is that why is it that the minority will have other means of access of happiness when this is the only means of access of happiness that they have, but not only that, oppression and to do out of their own self-defense. Secondly, in terms of net amount of good deeds being reduced, we have told you that those who can afford to do kindness is only going to be the rich, or maybe those who aren't going to be dismissed in this are going to be the poor or a minority who do it out of their own pragmatic reasoning, or politician who wants to be voted and such, right? Poor people will not have the net amount of good deeds under their side is going to be reduced because A, poor or individual who is less privileged and minority will not have any reason to do so. Secondly, people will not see their own act of kindness as genuine and will compare it with other individuals and say that it is not genuine and will be dismissed. This is bad because a lot of individual requires charity or requires political support from other politicians who wants to be voted in order to survive, such as the Black Lives Matter and such. But secondly, helping other poor individual is important because those are the individuals who most understand how and who impact the most, right? When it comes to food bank, for example, giving charity or giving foods to other poor individuals and such are the sole benefit that is, or the direct impact that is given towards people who is the most poor on the street and who is living in poverty. So what have we brought to you as opening opposition? We have told you that under their side, the good deeds will be goods that is only accessible by the elites. And secondly, we have told you the net amount of benefit or net amount of goodness will be reduced. Hence, a lot of people would suffer under their side. Very proud to oppose.
Thank you. Leader of Opposition spans 7 minutes and 42 seconds. 7 minutes and 42 seconds. To respond to the case of the Leader of Opposition, I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister. Floor is yours. Here.
Audible?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judges, we think that if we follow opening opposition case, then what you got will only the bare minimum of the help within the rich towards the poor, or how the political gesture will happen here and there, and that's exactly what we do not want, right? What we want is to actually maximize each individual, this minimum individual that actually has genuine intentions to care and giving happiness towards other people to help others, right? But 2 issues on my speech and all of my rebuttal will be intertwined in it. First, why only by altruism people will willing to do more good deeds? We think that doing good deeds is a difficult thing to do, right? Because you need to give a portion of your hard work for others. We think that only by individual that have altruism that they genuinely understands the issues and genuinely wants to help others is where you will give much more good deeds as an individual, right? Because if you follow their case, they're less likely to give their maximum in doing good deeds because it creates because for people think that it is enough to give certain amount of money, for example. In status quo, there's this kind of like jealousy of poor people towards the rich people when they do it's not because when they do good, it's not because of genuinely care, right? Because people tell them to do so, seeing that they has capital to do so, right? It will spark another jealousy from the rich towards the poor because it sends the message that if you are rich, then you will also need to work harder to sustain the poor, right? It creates bigger gap and makes people that will lessly make people willing to donate more, right? Only by people doing this by altruism is people willing to donate more when they are content within themselves and understanding that what I have is enough. That's why I want that's why I am willing to give to other people. This is where they're actually going to maximize what they have, right? So when we say that our social survivability will be lesser, we say that no, right? Under outside of the house, maybe that the individual will be not as much as what opening opposition proposed to you, but we say that each individual will matter, right? Because they genuinely care and they know how much they need to solve the starvation in Africa. They will going to look up the information on what they need. They will not going to make these rich people to actually donate, for example, because they don't genuinely care. But if you genuinely care, if you have altruisms, you're going to look up what are the needs or how you're going to improve their economic status, for example, and so on and so stuff. This is where it actually matters, because what we need to solve the problems within people who live under poverty, for example, is the exact answer for these people, right? So if these people could not actually go to education, then what you need is actually to build a road, for example, so not just giving them computer, right? But under the side of the house, people will going to feel enough because everyone seems to donate, right? This is where they think their donations is already enough, because they think that, for examples, if Microsoft already donate to Africa, for example, then there is no Mark Zuckerberg, for example, will less likely to donate towards Africa too, because they think there is enough. Microsoft already donates. Microsoft already donates to Africa, right? This is what we do not want to, right? What we want is to make sure that these people are going to have as much as they could to begin with, right? But let's talk about in parliament level. They said that the engagement within the movement and social stuff will be less under our side of the house, because we're going to limit the people. We said no, Mr. Madam Speaker. Under our side of the house, what will going to be happen in parliament level? For example, if Hillary Clinton doing those good deeds just because of wanting to get engagement within the black people, for example, that's exactly what we do not want to, right? Because what you're gonna get is actually just a political gesture, spreading campaign on how you're gonna get your rights within, how you're gonna get the rights when Hillary Clinton becoming president, right? What will going to be happening under our side of the house is how we're going to make sure that these people are going to search what are the needs of people of color in America, for example, right now. What are the status quo that is still oppressing the people, right? But why do we say it will going to be better off under our side of the house? Because the people who actually going to do that is the people who actually genuinely care and genuinely want to create happiness or alleviate the life problems of people of color, right? Because your side, that's why your side, there will be a lot more cases like George Floyd examples, because they actually do not really care within the people of color, right? Under our side of the house, this influential individual, for example, will going to do so much more, because they're going to really put in their best effort to solve the problem, right? But then second thing, we say that if you follow opposition proposal of the house, the value of deeds will be degraded, right? Because what we're going to say is that under there's side of the house, those kind of good deeds will going to be seen as an obligation for the rich, for example, meaning that everyone will probably do charity. This degrade the value of charity itself, where it is outside the power only the kindest people can do, right? If we make them as the people who genuinely care, people are more likely to give charity, because it is seen as a lifestyle, because it is seen as something as an actual good intentions to begin with, right? Not forcing people to do that. We are okay making charity only exclusive to only some people, because this is when charity is valued highly as something noble and generous, where people give out as much as they can to increase their generosity, right? If we make it everyone can do so, it will worsen, because government with their other basic service needs will only donate minimum amount to, right? Even if we make them as something exclusive, where it will be significant charity for those who are done by Bill Gates foundations, for example. This is how they will going to maximize their donations within those foundations, right? This is also show that you need to be secure enough as an individual to understand that you can actually share to others and fully concentrate of your own funding to actually concentrate of your funding and how that you can spread your wish, right? So if they say that this happiness of this individual who are rich will be achieved in doing good deeds because they're in doing good deeds, we think that's no, right? It's ridiculous. For rich people, the matrix for them to reach happiness is so many things, right? you can still get happiness if you can purchase the product that they want as a society. How can you be happy when you are not genuinely care or genuinely want to evaluate other people of other people life when you donate, right? What you're gonna get is the feelings of superiority because you can do so, right? Why OG is higher than OO? We think that the net of the rich will still be better off under our side of the house, where these individuals who are willing to help are going to maximize their house. Under the side of the house, they will only make this rich individual to have a platform for them to boast their richness and making this as a social ladder for them we propose.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. To close the opening debate, I call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Floor is yours.
Check, I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Oh, wait. My speech will start in 3, 2, and 1. I think that opening government was very dismissive of any kind of argument coming from my leader of opposition, because we already explained to you that how it will change people's behavior under their side of the house. The problem with opening government cases is that they never even picturize to you that how this narrative is going to be implemented in society. This is a world creation motions, so they need to have a burden to explain to you that how this kind of narrative is going to look like on their side of the house, how people is going to perceive this narrative on their side of the house. Because always the team to explain to you that how this kind of narrative or this kind of good deeds is all accessible for privileged individuals, and how it can change underprivileged individual to be way more pragmatic than before, never been responsive by the opening government. One independent rebuttals to the opening government. They say this: you will only do good things to and help people only when it benefit you. It's just any political gesture, and there will be no altruist people. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand this debate is not talk about altruism versus pragmatism. This debate should talk about whether or not you should use altruism as the only acceptable motive to do good things. So under opening opposition side of the house, we still have altruist people, but we also still have people that do it out of the self-interest, for example. So there was never a burden that opening opposition need to prove. Burden that OG need to prove. That's why the amount of altruism under the status quo is not enough, and why they want to push and they want to disregard any uptime that also have a good impact to society. I do not understand that. But I'm going to tell you that even if this is the case, why we are okay with this. OG never explained to you that what kind of benefit that these rich people will get by helping people. Most likely the benefit that these rich people do by helping other people are just things that make them feel better, or even just for the sake of exposure, for example. That's the reason why companies do CSR. This benefit that these rich people get, it's not directly harm these underprivileged people. So I don't see that why it's something that's very harmful if they want to ban it. But moreover, under our side of the house, exactly because they do it to benefit themselves, they want to make sure that the benefit that's going back to them is also going to be maximum. Hence, also we're going to going it and help people in a maximum manner. For example, if they want to have the extra and maximum exposure, so they need to do good this as much as possible. For example, what happened when companies do CSR, they expand the area of CSR, for example, because they want to have the news to keep reporting about themselves, for example. I don't think that's why it's something being very bad. Moreover, you're still able, these people most likely also want to accept criticism because they understand by this criticism, they can evaluate the charity that they do, so they can also do it better, so they can get better exposure. So people will not criticize them again in the future. So I don't see that why something is very bad. But even if government agree about Microsoft and how they're not going to create a meaningful help for African people, let's take them at their best, ladies and gentlemen. You need to understand the comparative in the rest of the house are the net amount of people that's going to help is not going to be that significant. But moreover, in status quo, even if Microsoft being that shitty, in status quo, people are still able to scrutinize Microsoft because they think that Microsoft did something that's very useless. There is still a capacity for people to criticize this rich people. I don't see that why it's something that's very exclusive on their side of the house. Moreover, even if all of these rich people could be that super altruist, but these rich people is only 1% of population. You cannot expect them to be able to help and touch every door in society. That is the reason why giving a capacity of the underprivileged people to also be able to do good deeds is important under our side of the house, because there are some circumstances that only being understood by the value of fellow underprivileged people. For example, the issues or the crime issue in the underprivileged community, for example, only able to be understood by this underprivileged individual and only being able to help by this underprivileged individual. So you need to encourage them that even at the very minimum form amount of help that they can give is meaningful to their society. So they need to prove, no, thank you. So they need to prove to you that why, even if under the best case, the maximum amount of help is going to be significant on their side of the house, because we don't want to relate to that 1% of population. The things that I will, one extension in my speech about how the world is actually exactly is going to look like on their side of the house. You need to understand, good deeds balance your human morality and keeps you in track, because it avoids people to do bad things. Good deeds will not longer to be accessible by underprivileged people because of the several reasons that my leader of opposition already told you in the very beginning. Under the side of the house, when this good deed is no longer accessible, there is no reason for them to fighting for having a good deed, because it is a too much burden that they should fulfill as a human being. So most likely the castle is going to be very high because you need to be super selfish. That is the moment, especially good deeds, especially because it's hard. So people most likely is going to be super pragmatic because they don't see that any reason why they able or want to do that. Why underprivileged individuals should not be super pragmatic? Because you need to understand, pragmatism exists on the opposition bench. We do consider that. But at least you have a good deed that's able to counterbalance it, because good deeds exist because it is accessible for these kind of people. Social movement like OG want to talk about is going to be very bad because you only want to fight for certain kind of personal agenda. Under the side of the house, you still being pragmatic. Under our side of the house, you're still able to be pragmatic, but you want to compromise and fight it for the greater good. For example, under the side of the house, when these people are being super pragmatic, they only want to maximize their personal interest and personal agenda in the social movement. It also will make these kind of underprivileged people less likely want to opt into movement because they think that this movement cannot maximize my super pragmatic interest. Under our side of the house, when you have two kind of things balancing each other, there's a moment they want to start to listen to other people. But second of all, even if at God's best case, people want to be super altruist, why be as an underprivileged being super altruist is something that's very bad. We need to understand, altruism expands to not only motive, but the means to achieve your goals. For example, there will be no violent actions because they will think that their good deeds to protect their community will be diminished because they will think that your good deeds coming from the sacrifice from other people by attacking majority, for example, ladies and gentlemen. So under their side of the house, when they want to even do good deeds, they will do good deeds with, they will make sure that good deeds will not come with any other people, sacrifice of any other people, which is very toxic, which only able to be done by rich people, because underprivileged people at some extent, they need to do this kind of thing to push the narrative to help themselves. Under their side of the house, majority will be protected and minority will also do not have this certain capital to protect themselves. So under their side of the house, the movement is also going to be very bad. What OO told you? OO will give you so many reasons why you should not be altruist, because it's not going to be effective as the bench say. You're also the team that gives you a picturization of how things are going to look like, and we're the team that play a government best case scenario that why things are going to be way more shittier than before. So anything that comes up in our closing, it will be less important than our case. OO, take this away.
Thank you, opening opposition. To open the closing debate, I call upon the member of the government. Floor is yours.
Ayaw dito.
Yes.
I don't know. We agree with the opening oppositions where the opening governments with their idea about being the most understanding people could help the social problems that you're having in the status quo is too abstract. And that's the reasons why their idea about the utilitarianism is more is a champion in the opening debate. However, what the opening opposition miss in the debate is that they do not concede that this utilitarian or any non-altruism motives could shape our society to be a cruel society, and and they even concede that the altruisms also appear in their word, right? But this is not true because the altruisms will have a tendency to be overshadowed by the other motives, and that is what we want to prove. First rebuttal towards the opening oppositions is their idea about the happiness. I think that the happiness that they're talking about is not the real happiness that, or the real happiness that these poor people should or deserve to get, right? The happiness that they're talking is the limited versions of happiness. In our side, we're gonna prove to you that these people also can have and have the rights to get the maximum amount of happiness that they deserve. Okay, so other responses will be more likely to be integrated in my substantive. First substantive is about how this altruistic motives can change the externalities of these individuals. That the word when the altruistic motive is not the only acceptable one, that will lead to the clashes between the social class. That is what we are seeing in the status quo today, because people will be competing over their own interest without putting others, without making others as their priority, right? This, especially when people in that situations, people will have the tendency to dominate over one another. The only word that will be created under the opposition bench is the word of manipulations, where the rich can manipulate the poor, when the privileged society can manipulate those who are being marginalized. And this is considered by the opening opposition when they say that rich people want to be more famous and they do the good deeds for that. This simply means that there is a competition to be more, to perform more good deeds, right? This is a kind of competitions that we think is unfair, especially for those who do not have resources to do that. And we concede that there are this kind of people, that they are marginalized people who do not have access to compete with those who are rich and capable of manipulating the entire society. Let's take a look on the examples that we are having right now. When, for instance, we are doing the protest towards a certain company because their policy is bad for their workers, they simply say, oh, you're lucky that we have hired you here in this company. You're lucky that we have opened this company so you can get jobs and get the money. These justifications is acceptable in the opposition's word. Under our word, this is not acceptable. The justifications is not acceptable. So this is what make the government and the oppositions different, right? And more importantly, what is being missed in the opening bench debate is the principle or the philosophical debate, right? I think that the altruism should be acknowledged as a way for human to consider others as human, not as a tool to get benefits from them. And this is what makes our world will be more peaceful as comparisons to the opposition's one. So going with the responses when they talk about the politicians, right? Because this is what more practicals. I think that the politicians that they're talking about is only liars. These politicians are liars, and their lyings will be justified under the narratives, right? And there will also include more dirty politics in there. At the end of the day, this marginalized community will not be represented in the governments, and no policy that will cater the interests of this marginalized uh, group of society. This is the reasons why I'll talk to you that the society created by the oppositions will be a cruel society where the marginalized people will be more marginalized under their sides. But under our sides, when the altruistic word is more dominant, is the only acceptable motive that those who are in need, those who need the help most will be helped by the politicians. As simple as that, as opposed to the oppositions, where these people will be manipulated and they will not be catered for their rights. Yeah. And other things, other contributions that has been being undermined totally by the opening opposition coming from the opening governments is about the individual level, how these narratives affects the people individuals. I think that it is better for us to consider that the non-altruistic narrative will create expectations because you are expecting feedbacks from the others, right? And this what we worry about because others' response is something that you cannot control. Even if you've spent a lot of money, you cannot expect or you cannot expect the precise amount of feedback coming from the others. And this is the source of stress, you know, because when the expectations, when the reality cannot meet with expectation, it creates stress and it impacts people in individual level. In our world, this kind of things will never happen because people do not expect things from others, right? But in the opposition's world, with their full of expectations, this will be a very stressful word. This is the reasons why I think that, yeah, sorry. So we are not only talking about the peaceful world that we're going to create, but we're also talking about the peaceful mind that we want to accommodate in our site, which is why we are so proud to propose.
Chair Judge, I would like to inform that after this, OO will only use one device from Bobby. So I'm going to leave this room, but I'm still listening from Bobby device. Okay.
All right. Is Bobby already here?
Yeah, Bobby is already here.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
All right. Okay. No. Thank you, member of the government. He spent 7 minutes and 4 seconds. Now please welcome member of OP.
Okay, before I start, can someone else time me because I do not have a timer right now that is accessible for me?
Yes, I can, but you have to see it through chat. Is that okay for you? Yeah. Okay.
That's okay. The chat will pop up anyway. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. In my speech, I'm going to bring to you 2 things. Very simple. Why altruism will not work all the time. And second, why pragmatism should also be accepted. But before that, let's jump into my responses, right? OG's whole issue is about understanding issue as a whole. OO has provided you a response to this, but we're going to provide you a different reason. Why? One, we don't get why this is an exclusive benefit under OG. We think when people do good deeds for ego trip and understanding issue can still happen side by side, right? OG response focus on politicians. We're going to respond to this in a more general sense. For example, when you contribute to a certain charity or NGO or a cause, you will be exposed to people who are also passionate about the cause. You will unintentionally learn about the cause in the process of you being in that certain community. Condemnation can also exist under us, right? For example, when you're a vegan who constantly gives charity to an animal foundation or an animal rescue foundation, at the same time, you still contribute to plastic waste, people within your community will constantly call you out on your action, right? This pushes you to be a better person in the process. Does this mean that the motive stems from altruism? We don't think so, because simply the motivation is that for this person to be accepted in the community. This is a pragmatic benefit, right? DPM continues to enforce the case of understanding issue as a whole, but one, never explaining why it's exclusive. Second, never shows you why there's a direct link from understanding an issue to doing good deeds. Because we think that an individual can just understand an issue, but take no action whatsoever. So dismiss their whole idea of understanding a case as a whole. And then they talk about politicians or people in general being genuinely caring, right? We don't age, but OG never shows the likelihood of genuine kindness or altruism is likely for people to obtain, right? Because simply when you are too privileged, I think you will just simply do not care anymore about the world. You just want to look good and you just want to like do good deeds simply for the ego trip, right? And then DPM came with the case of competition to the good deed. We don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing. This is exactly what the opposition bench has been championing to you, right? Because when people do good trip for the ego trip, for wanting to look good, people will compete, and at the end it will cost more goods to be done in the world because simply they just want to compete, right? And then they also talk about social movement. But here notice that the basis of social movement is pragmatism, right? When politicians or people have power, understand your concern and give you the policy or incentive that is needed for you to support your agenda. So we don't get why social movement necessarily depends on altruism, right? But let's get into my extension, why altruism will not be sustainable or it will not work in the long run. So here, understand that altruism heavily relies on people moral compass. Now, the problem with moral compass is that one, it is relative or subjective upon your environment. One, if you grow up in a kind, giving environment or a kind and giving family, you grow up being habituated to doing good deeds, to give charity, to keep looking out for your neighbor who is in need of food. But if you grow up in a family that has a survival mentality, it's okay to hoard wealth as long as we can survive until the end of time. You won't be habituated to do good deeds. You're only going to be habituated to do the other thing. You won't do good deed out of habit and altruism, meaning that relying in people's moral is unrealistic, right? On top of that, it is very unlikely for the individual morals to change because you reach a certain age where personality trait or moral compass become a fixated personality of yours. What can change a moral compass or what can change your behavior though is external pressure, right? Wanting to compete with friends and acquaintances and doing good deed, wanting to do good deeds just for pride or ego tripping, right? The problem with moral compass is that mostly it is situational and intuitive. When you have money, sure, I'll do charity, but when you don't, well, I'll just stop because I don't have the means to do so. But external pressure is something that is constant, right? For example, Jeff Bezos wanting to look good, and he constantly need to keep giving money to charity, regardless the fact of whether or not he is the top 1% or need to do more. What we emphasize in my argument is how he will always be under the spotlight and will always constantly be pressured to give money to people because he has the capital, right? So I think when you want to argue about doing good deeds, what matters the most is the outcome and not the motive of it. So why does outcome matters the most, right? Because outcome of good deed is what will directly help people, and this is the most important part of this argument or of this whole debate as a whole, right? And why is outcome exclusive under opposition? Because here, understand that OG never talk about how they are going to enforce altruism under their side of the house as the only acceptable motive, right? We imagine that under them, when people do good deed, they will be constantly questioned of their motive. They will also be constantly scrutinized for doing good deeds out of ego trip, for example. This leads to people no longer wanting to contribute in doing good deeds because the moment they do it, they get questioned and they get scrutinized just for different motives. These people will just be offended and no longer feel the need to do good deed, right? So we think that at the end of the day, if you really want to maximize help and maximize good deed as a whole, you just need to normalize or accept the fact that people have different motives, because at the end what matters the most is the help that can be trickled down from a lot of people, right? Second, let's why pragmatism is okay. My other extensive, I think that it is okay for people to be pragmatic in doing help. What does pragmatic means, right? It means that when after you do good deed, you hope for the good deed to be returned. So context is that sometimes when people do good deed, it is at the expense of your own happiness or expense of your own pleasure. For example, when you donate to a certain amount of money to a charity, it is at the cost of you losing that money for you to spend on something else. This means that there's a certain level of sacrifice that a person has to take in order for them to do good deed. So when individuals expect a return from kindness, we think that that is okay, right? Because the process of doing kindness or good deed is already hard. You need to sacrifice something. You need to sacrifice your happiness. Under OG, we think that it will be very hard for people to be happy while constantly do good deeds, right? Because when they do good with the basis of selflessness, they constantly dismiss their pleasure. They constantly dismiss their happiness. Happiness will only become their second priority as long as they're helping people, right? Under us, when pragmatism is accepted and when pragmatism is something that, we tell people that, oh, it's okay if you want to do good deed just because you want to be pragmatic. We think that people will start to hold other people accountable. Say I'm helping my friend and then I also help my friend in return. It means that my friend will not constantly rely on me and ngutang to me all the time, right? Because I also need the money to survive. And it is easier for you to eliminate toxic environment and toxic friends, right? Under government, when they are and everybody in their side of the house is very altruist, they keep helping people regardless of how toxic people is. Even if they're toxic, they're just going to help them because, oh, they're needy and I need to be selfless. So regardless of my relationship with this person, I will constantly help them. We don't think that government can champion the idea of accountability. So why does accountability matters, right? Because I think that you as a person will not be altruist all the time. As I've told you before, moral compass is very intuitive and it's reliant, it depends on the time and the condition of you at that certain time. When someone has already wronged you, under pragmatism and accountability, you realize that you can no longer help this person because this person is too reliant on you, right? You need to stop and you need to make sure these people can adapt and survive as on their own. But under the government side, they cannot have people with survivability mentality or people who will just help just for pragmatic reason, right? People under their side of the house will constantly be, fear, condemnation because their motive is different. And on top of that, people on their side of the house will be very unhappy because people in their environment constantly push them to help people at the expense of their own happiness. We don't think that is a healthy world that we want to support. Go for CO.
Thank you, Member of Opposition. Member of Opposition spent 7 minutes and 18 seconds. To close the case of the government side of the House, I call upon the government whip. Floor is yours.
Is this audible?
Yes.
Okay, cool. What we think is a threat towards our bench is the opposition case itself, and we think we're going to deny the OG's case itself. We think the reason why this world has distinctions, classes, and even the elites promoted by the ideas of opening opposition is that there exists 1% in this world is because that both reasons, whether altruism and even pragmatic, exists from the very beginning, and therefore it creates this unbalance from the very beginning that elites rule the world, and therefore they are corrupted from the very beginning, and therefore we think the reason behind this is the intention itself, and it leads towards that outcome. I'm just going to frame this debate very, very simple, understanding how these intentions are going to be very, very different, and I'm going to integrate all of opening opposition and closing opposition's cases into my frame itself. Now, we think we need to understand that there are going to be several stakeholders contributing towards this standard itself. We need the people that are going to be doing these good deeds and the transaction of the people that will be receiving these good deeds. We're not going to be looking at them at a politician level or even a company. We're going to take them as a whole society itself, whether they're going to be in a very, we're going to be diverse in all of these background stuff, whether they're going to be a person that have the capital or even these normal individuals itself. Because we want this world to change from the very beginning to only accept altruism as the only motive in doing good deeds. Hence, it will enhance and change the peace in this world itself. We think the reason behind this is the moment that these individuals, these humans themselves, embrace that the moment that you are going to do good deeds is an option for you to do so, and therefore you don't have you have no reasons behind that will influence you from the very beginning. So look at this framing itself, no judge. We think the reasons why the characterization of altruism itself, we think that they help or even do good deeds from their beginning. It's because it's pure, it's an entity of kindness, of empathy and sympathy from the very beginning to actually share the help and benefit towards these other of people. We're not going to talk about whether it's going to be people that will be benefiting this, but it's also going to not only individuals, but also an environment as a whole. For example, we said why the reason why that global warming happens itself right now is, for example, we know that how people are taking these resources itself. We think that is the reason why that people are corrupted from the beginning. They do not care about the environment. And we think this is something that we should put towards for. For example, people plant trees just because, for example, that they think that it is very beneficial for them from the beginning. It's not a transaction. It's something that they need from that essence itself. We think there are going to be two people that there are going to be two scenarios from the beginning. Whether that this person needs help from that case. For example, that I've told you that the O or even CO have told before that whether they come from a less capital or marginalized society, we think that we're going to describe that, and people that are doing this for no reasons from their beginning. Let's start from the first reason. For example, that these people that do have connections, for example, politicians to gain their votes or even towards these minorities itself. Two characteristics. First, we think these sort of people are always going to be in distress, seeking for possible option for quicker solutions. And therefore, if they're not going to continue on towards finding a solution, we think there's going to be second characterization, which is they're going to be always going to be desperate from their beginning. We think the time that is taken from them, and also when there is no effort, it's going to lead them to more damage from the very beginning. When we think the ones that have the capability to do so in overcoming this, for example, are the people that have the capital, and we don't think that there is a huge response directly going on towards that thing. And consider this, people. We think there are also unfortunate cases for people, for example, having these individuals that have accidents. We say that these people may have, for example, for you to have a payback, or even a huge concept is how we're going to cut out poverty and hunger. We think in order to do so is that the moment that you have a pure soul in helping, giving charity from the very beginning for these elites with no reason from the first place. Because the problem is the intentions that they have in this case. What is the intention here? We're going to characterize you what is going to happen at the moment that you have no reason from the very beginning. First, we think it is not going to be inflicted by greed or even corrupted feelings from their first place. Okay, yes, first it's going to be a pure reason. It doesn't have these other alterations or even effects that is going to be shifting these reasons of these individuals or even groups of people that are going to be doing good deeds. Second of all, is that this happiness is going to be purely for example, caring by others. And third of all, even if that this person is the one that have capital that brought by O or even CO, is that we think the reason why they are doing these good deeds is because that the social status that they have from the very beginning. For example, if they have they want to become a political leader, or they have a fame in the society, and therefore they want them, for example, have vote or even support to that extent that they want these sort of people, for example, to work for them or even have more attention towards them. We think this is very, very harmful because it is the moment that for example, that these industries or even how capitalisms happen or towards labor itself, what my previous member I've told you before, because of these companies, we are fortunate to hire and stuff and so on. But first of all, is that even if they don't have capital, we think what my previous speaker has told you before, that they think it's going to be because of their status, they want to have higher social gains. For example, competing within social class interests is going to be very hard because it's not going to solve from the very beginning. And worst of all is that if they have no capital, they're always going to be marginalized in the end of the day, and extended oppression is going to continue to happen. This is the reason why the moment that these people have power and capital, they only do charity or even do sort of good deeds in the moment that they have certain intentions, for example, certain events for you to have fame or even for you to have votes in political election or in certain elections itself. We think the reason why that the world that opposition is going to live in is going to be a world that is going to be full of greed and even corrupt itself. Because I've told you before, the reason why towards this damage and evil 1% of elites exist is because of the power that they have and the easier power for them to manipulate these sort of people from the beginning. We think these people that have the capacity to actually help other people, they do not do this fully solely because they care about their selfishness and they want to maintain their capital. We think their own interest is very, very harmful from the very beginning, and it's going to be shifting and harming others in the end of the day. Second scenario is that the moment that you help people, because of that person does not need help. We think we need this sort of thing, because, not help or even with no reasons, because we think this initiates other people to continue on helping, and other sorts of transaction will always continue. That's why that we don't think toxicity, for example, manipulation or even corrupting other people's good deeds is going to be happening in our side of the house. We think it's going to be a collaborative world, and therefore everybody's going to be altruistic and sharing a lot more advantages. Thank you.
Thank you, Government Whip. To close the debate, I call upon the Opposition Whip. Floor is yours.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panelists, 3 things that I'm going to brought in my speech. Right, first, I'm going to compare. I'm going to rebut point of OG and CG. Second, why our case is exclusive compared to OO. And the third, why then the comparative. In our world, we already successfully explained to you why then pragmatism is is necessarily needed and comparative work, right? Okay, first move on to the point of rebuttals. If you're looking at OG case, what you're looking is number one, how people how it is very harmful because people will not understand things, right? We think that we already talked about that point. India has already provided to you a lot of responses towards how understanding is also going to happen under our side of the house, right? Because essentially when people do good things because they want to look good, they should know the things or the charities that they are doing for, right? Because if not, people are going to scrutinize you because of the different principle and lack of understanding. But the second is, we think that the opening government is talking about how they want to boost understanding, how they agree that it is very harmful. First of all, question the implications of what is exactly the action that is harmful, right? What and towards what stakeholder that is very harmful to, because we think they don't have any attempt to explain to you essentially what is charities done by not altruistic is harmful for the people that need the charity, right? Because we as a closing opposition, we can see that charities and donations is that big the impact that helps a lot of people regardless of the motivation. They are not able to explain to you that inherently maybe people will be used as a tool and they will, used as a dehumanized or whatever. We don't see any attempt coming, right? So we think that OGK should be toppled down. But coming to the case of CG, inherently, what they are talking to is 2 points, right? The first, they agreed that charities done by an altruistic thing will give a tendency to dominate, manipulate, marginalize. Exactly. We also question because there are no attempt to what kind of manipulation or marginalize that they are talking about, because we don't understand any direct impact towards the people who receive the charity, right? But the second, we don't think that manipulation and marginalization will also happen, right? Because the moment when, for example, like an actress trying to support BLM, for example, the moment when she posts a BLM pictures without understanding the context or with a wrong context, people scrutinize him or her because of the lack of understanding, right? Scrutinize her for the sake of clout, for example. We think that at our side of the house, for example, like case of Emma Watson posting BLM pics with filter of white, we think that people keep questioning her motive and keep saying that it is not, it is not proper, right? We think scrutinizing the manipulations also happen outside the house. Also, CG cases about collaborative work. First of all, we do not hear any process analysis or whatsoever. How can altruistic work can lead to collaborative work? We don't understand. So we think that panels, you should not count their point, right? Okay, move to the second point. Why then? Why is our case very exclusive? Why you should count our cases in this debate, right? Okay, Judge. What differentiates us from opening is that we are able to explain to you, number one, is how we agreed that there will always be an external pressure to drive people to do donations, right? Because we already given to you the context that people do donations based on an altruistic reason is very intuitive and is not sustainable, right? India has already provided to you, number one, that how altruism is not sustainable because it's heavily dependent on the environment you're born in. If you're born in an environment that heavily depend on the survivability for your charity to be able to survive, we think that it doesn't, the more compassion you grow up is not going to be altruistic. And we think that it is much more likely for people to be to grow up in this environment, because we are living in pragmatic world where your survivability is counted on capital, for example. And the second, we also already explained to you why altruism, even if people do charities because of altruism, we think it's not going to be sustainable, because people at one point in the time, at the moment when they do charities, keep constantly doing charities towards a certain charities, for example. We think that there will be also one point that they feel like when they feel like they are drive out, and we think that there will always one point they feel like they are being taken for granted. For example, there will be always one time that people do charities based on altruism will feel like they are being taken for granted. But thirdly, altruism is not sustainable because it's heavily depend on intuitive, like the current situation of somebody, whether they have money or not, heavily dependent on that. But later in our cases, India has already successfully bring to why then charities done by external factors or egocentric drives people to do more charities and more sustainable, right? Because in our side of the house, for example, like big companies, for example, will always drive out to do charities because they want to make a good image of their company so that people can buy in and to be attracted in their company, for example. We concede that people do charities based on their egocentric agenda, for example, but we do not say that these people will always do charities and will end up in manipulation, for example, because things that I've told to you, society still scrutinize people that do charities but not in line with the charities they're doing for, right? For example, like a non-green company trying to support green movement, for example, we think that people will not buy that point and people will scrutinize the company. So we think that accountability is also there happening in our side of the house. So, in conclusion, why then comparatively the world is better on under side of the house? The world of government heavily independent of altruistic will not be sustainable. The second is we don't think that they understand what is the big impact of charity in donations, because we at opposition concede that charities and donation is that impactful for people in need. For example, like how BLM movement can gain closure because a lot of the actors are posting on their Instagram because they are making a discussion from a lot of popular actors that are trying to do this for egocentric. We think that's okay as long as the donations, as long as charities, as long as movement are done and is really impactful, regardless of their of them being altruistic or not. Otherwise, within our side, it also has already proven to you how it can act as a external push and will drive them to always do charities in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, opposition whip. Thank you very much, guys, for the debate. Please stay on this breakout room until I made the decision.